Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's great. I think I'm liking the new setup that we have here. We'll have to see if I like it enough to pay for the full blown setup. But so far, I'm liking the new recording setup for our podcast. Your thoughts?
I think it doesn't matter what we like. It's about giving the people what they want. I am never about taking the easy way out or our preference. For me, it is always about the listeners, the viewers. If they have something they want, say, do you want the podcast transcribed? I'm in favor of that. If somebody has stuff out there that they want us to try, I am in favor of that. Let's give it a shot. I'm not looking for the most functional thing or the best working thing or the easiest thing for us. What I want is the best thing for the audience, Tom.
So the question is, does the audience want to see us in lower resolution? I suspect the answer might be yes, but we'll have to let us know in the comments if you'd like to see us in lower resolution or if this is better.
You know what? Don't let us know in the comments. We'll just assume the answers there. Please don't. It's rough enough out there right now for a guy. So Tom, Ryan Day met with reporters on Monday. Also meeting with the media were his new four assistants: Perry Eliano, Tim Walton, Justin Fry, and defensive coordinator Jim Knowles. This is the first chance to speak to any of these people. The first time Jim Knowles' existence has even been acknowledged, almost. But it was a good opportunity to get the thought processes from everybody. And so let's figure we just start with Ryan Day, and wherever that goes, it goes. But in talking about Jim Knowles, he said he wanted a head coach for the defense. And Day was asked, so when you're thinking about this, did you ever think about just tweaking the defense? And my immediate thought was like, that's what you've been doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to work. And Dave's like, yeah, I did think about that, but then I also thought that's kind of what I've been doing. So he decided it was best for a brand new start for everybody and an overhaul, and to then allow Jim Knowles to create this defense kind of in his image. Knowles was involved with the hiring of Perry Eliano and Tim Walton, and he's been involved with the Larry Johnson and all of that, obviously. But now it feels like Ryan Day is ready to just hand the defense over, and it'll be interesting to see how hands off he is from the get go, and how far does he fluctuate further away? Does he fluctuate closer as things go? But I think he's seen a lot from Jim Knowles, obviously what he did at Oklahoma State, and there's plenty of track record there to where this is what he wanted. This is what Day wanted. He said he had about 7 candidates that he looked at, and Jim Knowles checked off all of those boxes. So there's no real reason other than it's your job to really be a helicopter dad with the Ohio State defense.
Well, he should be ready to hand the thing off. I mean, this is the guy he wanted to bring in. He brought him in because he wanted this particular defense, this particular style of defense, this particular guy to adjust to things in the middle of the games. And it was somewhat telling to me how many times we heard him talk about, adjusting to things and finding answers in the middle of the game and that sort of thing. But if you want to bring in Jim Knowles and let him run the Jim Knowles defense, you got to let Jim Knowles, this is the old Bill Parcells line, if you want me to cook dinner, you got to let me shop for the groceries. Jim Knowles had to have a little bit of a say in terms of who he was bringing in to be his assistants. He's probably going to have a good bit of say on defensive personnel moving forward. He's probably going to have, a lot of that kind of, options, choices moving forward, because if he's going to be the head coach of the defense, that means Ryan Day is not the head coach of the defense. And I think, we've seen in the past where, Jim Harbaugh brought in Josh Gaddis to kind of run the offense and get away from the Jim Harbaugh offense, and then you sort of saw the meddling there, and that's Jim Harbaugh's side of the ball, so you sort of understand that. This is not Ryan Day's side of the ball, and I think Ryan Day has maybe seen that, doing it, he had a certain thing he wanted, and then brought in a defensive coordinator who hadn't really run it before, and it was like, that didn't work really well. So now maybe you just got to be a little more hands-off. You have made your decision in terms of who you want. You've made your decision in terms of, how you're going to sort of move forward with this. Now let Jim Knowles cook. Like, just hands off, let him do his thing. And I think the way Ryan Day talked about it, it sure sounded like that was exactly where he, where this was headed.
Let him cook is interesting because Knowles talked about how when he took the Oklahoma State job, he knew that if he could just get the defense on the level of the offense in terms of explosion, execution, just not being the weight that takes the boat down. Like if we can just get on that level, they can win a national championship. And he said, or compete for one, and they came up a few feet short of that this year, but it took him 4 years to get there. And he said, and I know I don't have 4 years here. Like I know I don't have 4 years at Ohio State to get the ship righted. And he knows it's going to have to happen quickly. And I think he knows he'll get two. We've seen that. But I think the expectations are that things will be fine. And as he's looking over, and on Monday was the first day that all of the coaches were basically back and looking at personnel and talking over, like sitting in a room and saying, what about Denzel Burke? What about Jack Sawyer? Tell me about this guy. Tell me about that guy. And the existing coaches and Mick Marotti filling everybody in on who all of these players are. So now it's a really there's a lot of learning going on right now as the coaches learn about the players. Some of those players are back. The super seniors: Jerron Cage, Taraja Mitchell, Pala'ie Naoteote, Mitch Rossi. Ryan Day said that they were back. Seven Banks is moving on. Day said that Seven Banks is moving on and that he will sit down with. He's sitting down with Banks and his family on Tuesday, and that I guess kind of puts a bow on that one. One of the weirder last 12 months, last 6 months, 4 months of covering a player that we've had here at Ohio State, where so much was expected, didn't quite work out, and then almost radio silence in terms of, hey, is this guy coming back or what's the deal? And so he's not back. Those other guys are, and it creates a roster number that is much higher than the 85, and Day had a lot to say about that as well.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting because this is a very big philosophical shift, within the Ohio State program, but something that I think probably mirrors what's happening in a lot of other programs as well. You go back to the Jim Tressel era. Jim Tressel was always very careful to be right at that 85 number and then maybe a couple spots below it because you want to have a couple extra spots to give to, hey, a walk-on who's really earned a scholarship for his last season and that kind of stuff. And Mitch Rossi was someone who did that last year. He was a walk-on who they were under. They gave him a scholarship. Boom. And he, obviously earned it on the field as well. And now he's back for another year. What I think you're seeing here is a reflection of a couple different things. One is you can be at 92 right now, and it's not you're going to be shoving a bunch of people out the door like, in the old oversigning days where you'd have, Ole Miss was at, 98 or something coming into the spring, and it was like, how could they possibly get under after that? And you'd have this flood of transfers out. You now have, with the transfer portal, you just kind of assume with as much churn as there is on a college football roster, there is going to be churn after spring ball. It would be shocking if there weren't 5 or 6 transfers out from the Ohio State program after spring ball, and maybe even some during spring ball based on how things have gone in the past. So if you're at 92 right now and you have a couple during spring ball and 5 after spring ball, like ta-da, you're at 85. The prestige, ta-da. The other thing is, if you're at 78 going into the season or 81 going into the season, something like that, you at the, once you get through summer camp, once you get into the fall, you once again have seen lots of guys are going to be transferring. Guys will transfer in fall camp if they feel like they're not, they're stuck behind people on the depth chart. Guys will transfer in the middle of the season. Sometimes guys will transfer in the middle of games. Not often, but every once in a while that will happen too. So if you are at 81 coming into the season, and then you have transfers during the season, and then you have guys getting injured, Then you get, maybe potentially into opt-outs. Then you get to the situation where Ohio State was for the Rose Bowl, where it was like they had, 60-something healthy scholarship guys? Like, that's an FCS roster. That's not an FBS roster. So you want to be, with as much flux as there is going on just right now at every different point in the college football calendar, you want to be as close as you can be to that 85 number, because that number is generally, during the course of the season, that number is only going to get lower. So you want to be as close as you can to it at the start of the season when you have to hit that 85 number in order to have the most, the most full roster you can at the end of that season.
Well, and Day calls it a moving target, and I'm thinking, well, no, it's 85. But if you think about it, it's like archery on the back of a moving horse. Like everything is moving, and you're trying to hit something, and if you're at 85 now, you're in trouble. That's because you're 85 now. In September, you're going to be at like 78 or maybe 80 if you're lucky. So you have to go in. It's like spring training. You go in with however many, and then you just whittle things down as you get closer to the season, because 85 now is no good. And so it's an unfortunate situation to be in, but Day said, they'll make the number. He said it takes care of itself with the portal, and it always does. It's just right now, and I think I had been operating under the belief that the super seniors didn't count on the 85, and in fact they do. Last year was the only year they didn't, unless the rule eventually gets changed. So I know some of us, or some of the listeners or viewers may be saying, well, but the the super seniors don't count. They do. And that was something that kind of caught me off guard. And when I would look at the numbers and think, yeah, it's not that bad. And again, it will work out, because there are definitely players, as we talk about the blueprint for transfers. There's some there. The guys who are in their second, third year don't play, getting passed by younger guys, guys who realize that this is not their level. They need a lower level. I'm sure I could give you 7 right now and not break much of a sweat. Tom, I'll leave that up to you to do that. That's you're more of that, axe man. That's not me. I'm more of the kind person.
Speaking of archery on horseback, Tony, did you know the Mongols? The way the Mongols got to be such good horse archers was they were able to shoot when all 4 of their horses' hooves were off the ground. And that slight moment when all 4 of the horses' hooves were off the ground, that was the moment when they fired the arrows. That's why they were such good horse archers. This information brought to you by the Hardcore History Podcast. Hardcore History. Do you have 47 hours to learn about the Mongols? I have great news. There's a podcast for you. So anyway, about the numbers and the numbers working out. That was your transition to me, right? The numbers working out? I think it was.
No, I was actually going to talk about the Mongols, so it's pretty funny that.
So for years and years and years, it has always been the numbers always work themselves out, and for a long time there was sort of an implied air quote where the numbers always work themselves out, which is a very nice way of saying, sometimes we tell people to leave because we have too many people on scholarship, and some of them are never going to play, but they haven't figured it out yet on their own. So you have the conversation. It feels like now those air quotes are kind of gone. It feels like the numbers just are going to work themselves out, because there are going to be, you have seen over the last the last year or so, that there are plenty of guys who are making that decision on their own. When Ohio State is perfectly fine with the numbers, there's a lot of guys who are leaving. Ohio State was perfectly fine with the numbers in the middle of last season, and Dallas Gant still left. Kayvon Pope still left. Ryan Jacoby left. The reason those decisions are getting so much easier for those guys is you're no longer sitting out for a year. Like when you were sitting out a year, that felt pretty punitive, and leaving put you in a kind of a difficult spot. Ryan Jacoby left. Ryan Jacoby was a starting offensive lineman for Pitt in the Peach Bowl last year. I mean, it was like you can leave and you can go do your own thing, and you can go start at a lower level. And one of the reasons that Ohio State is a school where you want to be at 92 right now is because the transfer portal is going to be a net negative in terms of numbers for Ohio State. Ohio State is not going to bring in 7 guys from the transfer portal this offseason. They might bring in a guy or 2 to plug a certain specific need, but on the whole, you're going to lose many more bodies to the transfer portal than you gain if you're in Ohio State. Some of the lower level programs may have the opposite thing, where you're picking up more of the, if you're a MAC team, maybe you're picking up some of those lower level Big Ten players. who are more MAC level players, and they've sort of figured out they're more MAC level players, and they have an opportunity to play at a MAC school. For Ohio State, you're going to lose more than you gain, so you got to be kind of, in order to play that transfer portal game and make those numbers work, you're going to have to be a little bit high this time of year for the numbers to actually work themselves out.
Yeah, I was just looking to see if Dallas Gant had landed anywhere yet, and he's going to graduate from Ohio State in May and then decide. So that will eventually happen. I don't know what the next step is for Seven Banks.
It was very vague, which was interesting because it was, you're past the NFL draft deadline, so he's not going to declare for the NFL draft, apparently. So, yeah, is he transferring? Is he deciding he's done with football? My assumption is he's going to transfer somewhere, but yeah, the phrasing was kind of very interesting, and for them to have a meeting coming up, maybe that is a figure out your next steps kind of meeting. Because, you have the NFL draft is coming up, but you also have, there is a Spring Football League version 17,000 coming up with the USFL. I'm not sure what the draft requirements are for that, but, potentially that could theoretically be an option if they don't have a similar 3 years of college or whatever requirement.
There is also the CFL, and who knows? There are plenty of options for a guy, but I think maybe transferring to somewhere closer to home is probably what he will end up doing.
Speaking of the CFL, Tony, did you see who the new quarterback for the Edmonton Elks is?
I did, in fact. Tom, share with us who that is.
Joe Thomas Barrett IV. J.T. Barrett headed to the Edmonton Elks, who changed, if you're wondering, didn't they used to be the Eskimos? The answer is yes. They changed their name before last season. They are now the Edmonton Elks. And J.T. Barrett is apparently going to be playing quarterback for them this year. So that's I saw that and I thought, am I looking at an old tweet? Is this a tweet that's like a promoted tweet from 3 years ago? How is this my timeline now? But yes, that is new news this week.
I believe Stanley Jackson may have also played in the CFL.
He was with the Montreal Alouettes, yes.
Troy Smith also with the Montreal Alouettes at one point. And then there was somebody else that I can't quite think of right now, former Buckeye playing in the CFL at quarterback. Tom, who was that?
Was it Steve Belisari? No. There was someone else who was a notable person, was it?
Yes, it was. And it shouldn't be that hard to come up with a starting quarterback. Kenyon Rambo played a long time in the CFL. Mm-hmm. He was a very productive player, but
the way you were setting me up there, I was like, I didn't miss a Tate Martell tweet. Like
no.
Did I? I didn't. No. Okay.
No. But so yes, the CFL. Tom, thanks for getting that in there. Always need to make sure we talk about the CFL. We talk about the CFL more than the NFL at this point.
And so the Mongols. Good. Lots of
Montreal Mongols. So also watched a little bit of the Justin Fry sit down. He mentioned that he's a pretty simple guy. He said he wants on 3rd and 2, like he wants everybody in the stadium to know where the ball is going and then to still pick up the first down. He said he wants his 9-year-old or 10-year-old daughter to know where the play is going, along with everybody else in the stadium, and not have it matter, because that's how well the execution is done up front. And I tweeted that out, and people start responding like, yeah, that's awesome, that's awesome. Other people are like, is JT Barrett coming back? So, obviously you want to hear that yes, he's simple, but he's still the aggression, the running game that he wants. And I thought it was interesting. He talked about, because he was the coordinator at UCLA, and he's not going to be a coordinator at Ohio State. He said, I'm not hung up on titles. I'm hung up on winning and losing. And him being a former coordinator, when he's in a meeting with everybody, he understands the play calling, what play from one play to the next, how it helps the next play, and how it figures into the offense as a whole, and how it affects the defense. So he's looking forward to just being able to give that kind of input, working with Kevin Wilson, working with Ryan Day, kind of an offensive lineman's dream, and then also to have the talent on hand. He's not to the point where he's been looking at the players per se, like that. Again, that just happened on Monday, where they really start to break down the personnel. but a Midwest guy, Tom, going to have to said he had to unpack his winter clothes, some coats, and also I think it was Tim May who asked him, "Have you bought a house yet?" He said no, but it's going to be a lot bigger than the house I could have bought in L.A.
Yes, the cost of living calculator works out in your favor when you're moving to Ohio from Southern California. That was a lesson I learned coming to Ohio from Connecticut in the 1990s. It was like, wow, everything's so inexpensive here. I can't believe it. I probably can't ever afford to move home. So, TLDR, still live in Ohio, and yes, by choice, not by economics. So, yes, it was interesting. The 3rd and 2 thing was interesting to me because that's something that you want to be able to do that, and I think the unspoken part of that is we don't want to be that predictable. If we have to be, we can. You want to have the option to pick that up, but you don't actually literally want to be that predictable, because that was JT Barrett. I remember sitting at the Cotton Bowl, I think, with James Grega, who was then a sports writer and is now the coach of the Ohio State club football team. He was sitting next to me, and it was like 3rd and 1. And he's just calling out the play. All right, it's going to be QB power. They're going to run it between the guard and the tackle on the right-hand side. You're going to start with motion from right to left, and then you run and then it was just like, it was like broadcast news. I say it here, it comes out there. It was just, and everyone in the stadium knew it, and it was just like, here's what they're going to do. You can't stop it. And that was great. You knew that was what they were going to do in 2016 against Michigan. And thankfully for Ohio State, A.J. Alexander's butt was not 3 inches further back than it was, so therefore they picked it up. But it's great to be able to do that. That's more of a state of mind thing than an actual game plan thing. But if you come in knowing you can do that, then that opens up all sorts of other stuff too.
Yeah, another topic that Ryan Day was asked about is the NIL Edge team that OSU created. He said his quote was, "It's huge," and the past year has been a learning experience for everybody at the university and beyond in college sports, at college athletics, on where NIL is, where it's going. And he said a lot of the guys on the team have really been able to capitalize on it, and now the more that the university can get involved, the better. But sadly, Tom, they will still continue to follow the rules. They're not going to break any rules, and and really, the implementation of the NIL Edge team is really part of discovering the rules in terms of what is allowed. Can we do this? Oh, we can, because other people are, so we're going to do this. And he said Gene Smith will always allow them to be at the forefront of this and helping Ohio State compete against everybody else. They may never necessarily be, and this is just me saying this, they may never necessarily be the first people to do it. But once they see that it is allowed, they're not going to do it. Like, this is, so we can broker stuff, we can put people into contact. Why wouldn't we do that? We have the means, we have the funds, we have the ability, we have an entire large roster and ability to hire people to do this. So yes, they will continue to do that. So Brian Day seemed pretty happy about that aspect.
Yeah, and if people are wondering, how could you possibly not know what the rules are? Let's take a trip back in time to last summer when the NCAA on like June 15th was like, no, you can't, no, this is impossible. We're going to fight this tooth and nail. And then right about on June 28th or so said, actually, whatever, it doesn't matter. You remember the Purge? It's kind of like that, but you can give players cars instead of murder them. So it was kind of like a very much figure it out on your own kind of thing, because the NCAA just kind of threw up their hands and walked away, and every state had different rules, and every state had different laws, and it was just complete chaos. So this is not, this was really not on Ohio State, that they were, not as, not the ones really pushing the boundaries there, or where there was a little bit of gray area with the rules, because there was a lot bit of gray area with the rules last year, and there probably is somewhat still moving forward, but now you've seen, it's like, okay, well, that guy just jaywalked. That guy didn't wait for the walk sign. So I guess okay, I guess it's cool. I guess we can kind of do this now. So okay, all right. So it makes I don't really have a big issue with the way Ohio State handled this. I think this is all stuff that's sort of still getting worked out, and you're I think you're going to see some of the stuff that worked this year, and some of the schools that benefited from things this year aren't necessarily going to be the ones that move forward in that area as still kind of the leaders in the space. As things sort of regulate themselves more, both in terms of a market where it's like, well, maybe it's not worth paying a high school senior $1 million to play quarterback because, maybe it will work out and maybe it won't. And so it's all going to kind of sort itself out. But I think from Ohio State's perspective, taking the approach they did where it's like, don't do anything like remarkably stupid the first year, because it's not going to cost you anything huge to just kind of play it a little bit conservative the first year, sort of let everything sort of sort itself out, and then you move forward with a little bit like, okay, now we know a little bit more about the rules of the game, so now we're going to, it was remember Calvin Ball? Remember Calvin and Hobbes and Calvin Ball? It was Calvin Ball last year, and it's now, okay, now we know some of the rules of Calvin Ball, now we can play the game again.
I even remember being like a 3-year-old, 4-year-old playing cards with my mom, and I would create all of these games, and she hated playing cards with me because the rules always changed, just depending on what kind of cards I need. But the NCAA just backing off it. It's kind of like when you get into an argument with your wife, and she's just like, whatever, go do whatever you want. I'm not, it doesn't matter what I tell you. You're just going to go do whatever anyway, and that's the NCAA, just like a bitter wife at times. Not in general. Like this is not my experience.
Be careful, Ryan Day. It's a trap.
Exactly. She's not fine. All right, and she will eat your fries. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about the early enrollees right now, including Chip Trainum, Diamante Trainum, and Tanner McAllister. The coaching staff talked about those guys today in their meetings. One of the things that I thought was really interesting, Jim Knowles talking about Tanner McAllister. Of course, he transferred slot safety from Oklahoma State. Said that he expected him to go to the NFL. He expected McAllister to go pro. And when he saw him in the portal and then things worked out, he is going to give the Buckeyes a coach on the field. And he's already gathering, he said he's already gathering players up and taking them and explaining to them. One of the interesting things that I found is not just the defensive system, but he also said he can also let them know, like, when I get after people, he'll let them know my coaching style. Like, because I can I can yell and I can get kind of forceful. He can then calm them down, tell them later, like, don't worry, this happens every practice, and just give them that perspective of it. And I thought that was interesting as well, because it's not just about teaching and getting everybody on the same page with the system, but also getting everybody on the same page with the demeanor of the defensive coordinator.
Boy, that would have been a smooth transition from our previous conversation about marriage, huh? Anyway, the Tony's looking behind him.
There's a spider on the. I was just watching a spider crawl. It's getting closer and closer to me, so I'm just being careful.
Yes. So anyway, that's really interesting because, we had talked about the fact that he, as a coach on the field type, you can bring in a lot of the terminology, a lot of the knowledge about the system, a lot of the demonstrate the drill before you have to do the drill kind of thing. That's all really, that was sort of the obvious piece of it. The sort of soft factor piece of it is really interesting to me because that's something you don't necessarily think of. Like Kerry Combs was, the super motivational, very supportive, lots of clapping, lots of cheering, but also would yell at you. So, but, Knowles is someone who his players all seem to love, but he's going to be different than Kerry Combs. So if you're used to Kerry Combs, and it's, if this guy maybe isn't quite as, supportive and also yelling, if it's more, if it's, 70-30 yelling to, clapping and cheering, as opposed to 60-40 the other way with Combs, it's going to be like, this guy hates me. It's like, no, it's okay. He's like that with everyone. And that seems like that, we'll find out more about Knowles' demeanor as he spends more time around the players, but he doesn't seem like he's quite as, what's the word I'm looking for here? Quite as not personable, but not quite as
Boisterous.
Boisterous is a good word. Maybe not quite as boisterous as Combs was. Yeah, not quite as boisterous as Combs was. So if you're used to that, it'll be like, man, this guy hates me. It's like, it's fine. This is how he is with everyone. So yeah, that was a really interesting point to me. And something else that's kind of interesting is all these guys, this is something you sort of expect to hear from coaches when when new coaches come in, but it said everyone is starting from square one. Like, everyone's starting from zero. No one is coming in with baggage from last year. Everyone sort of comes in with, what does this guy do? Just because this is what you did last year doesn't necessarily mean that's what you're going to be doing next year. You're gonna kind of come in, then have a fresh set of eyes on everyone, and sort of figure out from square one. Okay, just because you played the cover safety spot last year, maybe the responsibilities are changing a little bit this year. So that should make putting together way too early depth charts. That should make that real fun for us this year.
Yeah, and I believe Perry Aliano said on Monday that just because they played somewhere last year doesn't mean they're going to be playing there this year. They're going to take a brand new look at everybody. And one of the other coaches said, basically, yes, it's clean slates. We'll watch what they did last year to get an idea of how they move, how well they physically they move. Mm-hmm. But whatever happened last year is last year, and Day said the players are all excited about that as well, and the ability to put out these first impressions, the real impressions. Now, like I said, they'll look at last year and the years before that to get some ideas, but that won't mean as much as what the coaches see on the field now in terms of workouts and that kind of stuff, and then obviously in spring and beyond. Tom, anything else that you wanted to touch on before we go? I think we've touched on most of it. We've got time to get into other things down the road, but I think we hit on most of it.
We hit on most of it, and I think the thing that maybe to me is the most interesting about the whole everyone gets a fresh start thing is moving forward. There's going to be someone who was buried on the depth chart last year, who all of a sudden in the spring is like, wow, this is the breakout player of the spring. And sometimes it's just like the new coaches are looking for something different, or they're just looking at different traits or something like that. You have the opportunity to have like real changes in terms of guys' position on the team and opportunities moving forward, which, I mean, that's always super intriguing to me. Like, who is the breakout player of this spring? Is it the spider climbing on Tony's wall that he's looking so nervous right now? It might be. Tony, spider for starting boundary corner this year. Who says no?
The problem is, I just saw him a couple seconds ago, and now I don't see him. So he must be on me. That's the real fear. No, you mentioned the guys that come out of nowhere. Feels like a show that we should do. Mm-hmm. However, the danger is that you're picking guys who are also just as likely to be in the transfer portal. Uh-huh. So, like, I think this guy's going to blow up. And then before we even get to air that show, the guy's going to be in the portal.
Tony, as a veteran of the college football media process, let me tell you the way to hedge that show. The players for whom this is the big spring. That's how. See, it's like it could be a big spring one of two ways. So that's how you do it. I will take you under my wing and give you further lessons on covering college football as we progress through the year. But that's a good pro tip there for you.
Spring's biggest movers. Either they're moving up the depth chart or they're moving to Piscataway.
There's lots of directions.
So, perfect. I think that will then do it for this episode. Want to thank everybody for tuning in. Obviously, thank you for joining us as always, and have a good day.